More than 2,000 Americans died, 2,400 of them, December 7th, 1941, when Japanese forces launched that sneak attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. A national commemoration ceremony at the USS Arizona Memorial will happen at 1 today, 1 Eastern. And World War II veterans here in the tri-state will be passing their stories to future generations or current generations this morning. More than 75 veterans will speak with students at Princeton High School this morning. It'll actually be across the street there at the Sharonville Convention Center. They'll also be treated to lunch and take pictures with the students. That's believed to be the largest ceremony of its kind in Cincinnati. The luncheon is sponsored by the Urology Group.
More than 75 World War II veterans gathered at the Sharonville Convention Center, where they shared their stories today. Our Roseanne Aragon spoke with a veteran who says he will never forget the day of that bombing.
That's right, Tanya. This man says to this day he remembers the moment the U.S. went to war, and within a couple of months he enlisted to serve our country. Today he tells me it's a moment that changed his life. A moment of fear turned to action. It was the bombing of Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. Jay Solomon was 17 when he enlisted. Today, he's 93 years old, sharing his story with fellow veterans and high school students. The Urology Group, hosted the event to honor the men and women who served our country and remember the beginning of World War II. Solomon remembers the call from FDR saying the U.S. was going to war. As a teen, he went to Asia. He was a radio control tower operator. He remembers it vividly.
Just like any other young person, you have to let it sink in. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I mean, something like that all happening so fast. They would try to bomb our runways, keep our B-29s from getting off. And they were successful a lot of times. It was the beginning of my life, really, after the war.
Solomon is one of only 620,000 survivors of the 16 million people who enlisted. The Urology Group says this is the second largest gathering of veterans in the U.S. today, next to Hawaii. Now, these are stories that will be shared. The Urology Group invited high school students to interview the veterans for a class project, and they will help keep their stories alive. For the Now, Roseanne Aragon, back to you.
Ready to go to Japan? We were trained.
Tonight is about remembering a day that changed American history. This day, 75 years ago, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. The Sharonville Convention Center and the Urology Group hosted dozens of World War II veterans today, giving them a chance to reflect.
One veteran sat down with our Roseanne Aragon, who joins us now from Sharonville. Roseanne.
Today is a chance for conversation. This man that I spoke with was just a teen when he fought for our country, and the journey he had, the experiences he endured, changed his life forever. Today he's one of 75 veterans who get to share their stories. December 7th, 1941.
A date which will live in infamy.
When the attack happened, I was a student in high school.
Morton Malin remembers this moment as if it were yesterday. Bombing of Pearl Harbor, when more than 350 Japanese warplanes would send bombs, killing more than 2,000 Americans. He was 15 when FDR declared war on Japan, entering World War II.
The American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
The youngsters, he said, you people have to prepare for the fighting. You have to stay well. And the kids took it literally.
After graduation, Malin joined the Army. He would train on the beaches of California.
Training to invade Japan. And this was all very exciting, but frightening. I climbed over a lot of dead people.
At 18 years old, fear left him.
I saw ugly scenes.
He fought in Germany.
42 days active combat. At that age, you're not afraid.
He was then to go to Tokyo, where he says he was mentally preparing to die.
Our group was scheduled to be right in the front in the invasion.
But the U.S. dropped atomic bombs in Japan, eventually ending the war. Today, at 91, Malin is here.
When we were en route to Japan, the bomb was dropped.
Sharing life-changing moments with the youth.
And so we were spared.
Of the 16 million people who enlisted, less than 5% are still alive. This is a story Malin will share for the rest of his life. In Sharonville, I'm Roseanne Aragon, 9 on your side.
It is an incredible story and an incredible life. Tri-State veterans had a chance to share their war stories with high school students today. The Urology Group hosted today's lunch at the Sharonville Convention Center. Students from Princeton High heard from veterans about what it was like fighting in the war and being so young. Morton Mallon was 17 when he enlisted in the Army. He is now 91 years old.
You're still not a grown-up at 19. And you're not thinking of the consequences, the dire consequences. You're just doing your work. That's it.
Mallon was on his way to Japan when the atomic bomb fell.
Today marks the 75th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, drawing the United States into World War II. And dozens of local World War II veterans are gathering right now to remember and reflect on that day. Local 12's Megan Moore joins us live from the Sharonville Convention Center, where those veterans are sharing their stories. Megan.
Hey there, Paula, and everybody is getting right now. This is believed to be the largest ceremony of its kind in the Cincinnati area, with more than 75 World War II veterans all in the same room. A very rare opportunity for people to meet and talk with them and hear their stories. Now, the veterans were invited here by the Urology group. They put this event on for its patients and their guests. The veterans are hearing from two guest speakers today, one being Robert Miller, a UC professor who wrote 2 books on the wartime experience, and also Big Red Machine all-star outfielder and Reds Hall of Famer George Foster will be speaking. We were able to talk with a Navy veteran, Hubert, who served in the Navy for 3 years. He was at Pearl Harbor a year after the attack, and you'll hear more from him later on Local 12. Also very cool, while the veterans are here, high school students from Princeton are here as well, and they are doing a school project. It's they're creating a living history project to collect and share the personal accounts of the World War II veterans here. So very unique. They'll actually be writing a paper, and then also their film class is putting together some sort of documentary. So it'll be a project they'll be working on for quite some time, and I got to talk with them as well. You'll hear from them coming up later on Local 12 as well. But again, just a very unique opportunity to be able to talk with the veterans here, and also really cool for the students to be able to talk to them as well. Paula?
Right, living history. Thank you, Megan.
Some of the stories lodged in the hearts and minds of those called the greatest generation were shared with the next generation today. WLWT News 5's Curtis Fuller has the story from Sharonville.
An impressive gathering of World War II veterans here at the Sharonville Convention Center on this historic day, keeping their story alive.
It was something that we expected, though. We had been hearing for it, you know, but we didn't realize how what the Japanese had. Their Navy was so far superior to ours. We had no match for them at all.
96-year-old Walter Krause is a 30-year Navy veteran. He was on duty on the day which will live in infamy. He was on a sub stationed off the western coast of the Philippines.
Pearl Harbor was attacked. It was for us December the 8th out there. It was about 2 or 3 in the morning.
Mr. Krause joined more than 80 of his fellow World War II veterans as memories of the war and Pearl Harbor in particular filled this space. 91-year-old Robert Watson of Hamilton proudly wears his Congressional Gold Medal around his neck, recognizing his service as one of the first African-American Marines. He was called up in 1943.
The war was necessary. The Japanese had attacked us, and we had to come back and take back the land that they had taken from us, and also prevent them from coming to our shore.
Princeton High School students took part in this program to see and hear history firsthand. The students are creating a living history project.
Questions about what they did before the war, what they did during the war, what they did after the war, and how the war affected them.
We should all thank them for what they did. Every day that we live in this country, it's a day that someone died protecting it.
These veterans say they hope the future holds a renewed patriotism and that people will never forget the lessons learned from the past. I'm Curtis Fuller, WLWT News 5.
Today's program was put on by the Urology Group of Cincinnati.
Locally, more than 75 World War II veterans attended a commemoration ceremony for the date, you see them standing right there, for the date that FDR said will live in infamy. Today's ceremony was hosted by the Urology Group at the Sharonville Convention Center, and our videographer, Dave Smith, shares the story of 2 local veterans and how they found out about the attack.
I was laying on a bed in my mother's house a week after we won the GCL in football, a senior in high school, and the media went on to make the announcement that Pearl Harbor was attacked.
I probably was out playing baseball because I was an athlete. And I imagine somebody said, hey, Pearl Harbor got bombed, and like everybody else, what is Pearl Harbor?
And everything changed immediately. So all I can say is that we could have been better prepared, but we weren't.
Pearl Harbor is sort of like a dream. It doesn't sink in until you study it and see the pictures.
People don't realize the sacrifices that generation made, but I think it's something that should be remembered and talked about.
Unless we talk to the youngsters, the history is just going to go by the wayside.
Going back in time, today marks the 75th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, pulling the United States into World War II. Moment of silence will be observed at 12:55 today, which was when the first bomb was dropped. Lauren Bruner was a sailor on the Arizona at the time. All these years later, he still finds it tough to talk about.
If I do talk about it, I cannot sleep.
World War II vets are meeting today with tri-state students at the Sharonville Convention Center to share their experiences from the war. Luncheon sponsored by the Urology Group. Flags today in Ohio have been lowered to half-staff in honor of the 2,403 American men and women who lost their lives in the Pearl Harbor attack.